First, I'd like to thank you all for coming.
Up to the face so you can hear.
Fair enough. Is this better?
Much better.
Excellent. I'd like to thank you all for coming, and hopefully we can make this a productive session for all the candidates and all the people here in attendance. The purpose of this forum is informational. As you all know, the school district race is nonpartisan. At the end of our session today, the East Penn Republican Committee will gather and choose whether or not to endorse any of the candidates. However, as I say, this is informational. We hope that you'll come away knowing more about the candidates and hopefully a little bit more about the school board than you did when you came. So without further ado, I'd like to turn the floor over to Mr. Chris Donatelli to introduce himself, and then we'll take questions from the audience.
Hi everybody, thank you for having me here. My name is Chris Donatelli. I've been in Ancient Oaks for 20 years. I have 3 kids. The oldest graduated from Emmaus in 2003. The youngest is graduating this year. I graduated from Gannon University in Erie, Pennsylvania in 1985 with a bachelor's of mechanical engineering technology. I've been in filtration for the last 20 years. I was in the economy in 2008, so I had 16 years prior doing management and technical sales, and the last 4 years I've been doing engineering, sales, managing in the industrial filtration field. Some of my prior experience, I was assistant scout master with Troop 71 McCungy for 10 years, and currently assisting the Emmaus rifle team in the off-season. By the way, Emmaus rifle team went undefeated in the league and districts, something that we supposedly has not happened in any of the schools in this league. So congratulations, Emmaus rifle team. By the way, my son's on the team, as you can probably assume that. So we are proud. I decided to run for school board for a number of reasons. I've been probably complaining for the last 20 years, and now that my kids are grown up, some life-changing events happened the last couple of years. Last year I had the opportunity to be an assistant delegate or an alternate delegate for the RNC down in Tampa. I saw some things there that were, good and bad. Also took notice that I couldn't change things on that level, but getting down here in the grassroots is where you need to get in with your community. And getting in with my community last year, running for signatures, met a lot of people and decided this is the place to be. So I'm looking forward to going back out and meeting my community again, and hopefully getting them more involved and keeping them actively involved with what's going on in our community. The other thing that I had a problem getting involved with the school board, seeing some of the meetings, see some times it's adversarial. I hope that me being somewhat comedic can bring some enlightenment to those meetings. And the idea is to work together and get things accomplished. When there is acrimony, I feel things don't get done. So I hope to be able to get involved and change that, keep things on a lighter note. There is going to be some tough times ahead of us, and I feel that my previous experience in the corporate world is going to be helpful in getting us through these tough times. And I don't think it's over. We're going to be over for a couple of years yet, so I appreciate that we have to get through this. So I'm asking for your vote, and appreciate you giving me this opportunity.
I'd like to open the floor to any questions from Mr. Donatelli. If anyone has a question and has written it down on one of the response cards, you can either raise your hand or if you'd like to go over and write one down. And if no one else has one, I'd like to address something that was the Common Core question, which was distributed to all the candidates beforehand. You say that you don't agree with programs mandated by the federal government. They take away the teacher's ability to be dynamic in the classroom.
And my question is, if not the Common Core, which is mandated by the state of Pennsylvania, what other standard would you propose or how would you adjust the Common Core as a standard in the East Penn School District?
Well, I think as being a school board member, I think that's the school board's, it's their position to go in and set the standard. I don't think if the government, the state government, or the federal government gets involved, it's taking away our sovereignty to take care of our community. And I think as a school board member, that's another thing that I would like to try to do is have the school board set the standard for the community.
I don't know. Are there any other questions?
Yeah, I have a question. Yeah, John Hinkle, I live in Upper Milford Township, and my question to you is, the very frustration that I, as well as many of my neighbors and many of my friends in the East Penn School District is, and that's one of the reasons why they don't go to the school board meeting, it's probably the reason why they set it up this way. But when you ask a question and you don't get a response, but they'll tell you down the road, well, someone will call you, then they get with you on a one-on-one, but they won't address your question in public at a meeting. Would you support changing that particular?
I absolutely would. I think there's a lot of things that can be changed with a school board meeting. I've been kind of watching and listening. I have somebody I work with is on the school board, and they do some things a little differently. They actually have a question and answer period prior to and post meeting. I think there are some things we need to do to be more interactive with the community. Again, that's one of the things I'd like to see changed. I think the community is important, should be involved with what's going on. They're the tax base. They're the guys that are, I shouldn't say that, I'm sorry. They are the people in the community that's paying the taxes that support all of this. So I definitely would think we should do more to get them involved and encourage them to come to the meetings.
They do it on the county level. You go there and you ask a question, they respond. And here we have this pathetic school district that they can't respond, and you look at the money you pay towards your school taxes in comparison to your county taxes is far out.
I'm all for thinking outside the box.
Right.
I'm an engineer at heart, and that's what I was trained to do. And again, I think I can carry that over to the school board.
Thank you.
And by the way, we do have a format. I would ask if you would write down your questions, but since everybody's keeping civil, we can keep it more open. If you don't mind using cards, that is what to do. But please go ahead.
Yeah, my name is Rob Hamill, and I was the vice president of the school board the last year that we actually lowered taxes back in 1993, I think it was. You mentioned that you're looking at approaching things from a different perspective. One of the biggest problems that we have in East Penn is that the school boards have been what I call soft on teacher union issues, namely, teaching 4.5 days a week, and namely allowing them to get away with the multi-million-dollar pensions and salary increases. What will you do about being firmer with the negotiations? Because that's the elephant in the room.
Well, one of the things, the 4.5 day thing, I had a problem with that back, because I think that's only elementary. I think it's only K through 5 or 1 through 5. But, I had a problem with that with my kids growing up, and I think it's something that should be changed. And I don't know the whole background behind it, but I think it's something that was set a long time ago and is probably due to be reevaluated and changed. I don't see any reason why they keep it, but I think every teacher should be. Again, I think the school district and how things are taken care of should be addressed like we do with private industry. It's those of us that are working in private industry that are supporting the school system. Things should be handled in similar fashion.
We have a question from the audience. Mr. Donatelli, would you support webcasting school board meetings and archiving the webcast? Why or why not?
Well, it's already being done, but depends how you look at it. Some of the things that were talked about was, one, we've had some meetings that have been going on for a long time. I know I've tried to sit for an hour and a half in front of my computer, and it's tedious. But there was also discussions with the superintendent about editing, and right there that concerned me. I don't think if we're going to start editing things, it takes away from the reality of what's going on, and things could be taken out that shouldn't be taken out. So that's not a cut and dry question. One of the other school board members had also suggested maybe just having a recording of it, which could be very simple to do and maybe not cost any money to do. But things can be done. It can be done without costing a lot of money, and I disagree with what was proposed and what had to be done. So I think, yes, it can be done, and I think it should be looked at, but again, it's going to take a school board that's going to come to have a common ground to make it happen without the supposed costs that are involved. I don't know if I answered the question.
Sure. Mr. Stoltz.
I do have it on my card, but it could be read for multiple candidates.
You'll have a chance later.
Wonderful. The second part.
The second part. Okay. If this is your first run, under what circumstances would you vote for a tax increase?
I can't think of it.
Good answer.
Jim. Okay. Are there any other?
Back here.
Sir.
Mr. Donatelli, first of all, Mark Spangler, I'm a resident and a teacher in the district. Having your son in class is a pleasure. So, you told me about the reference and stuff. Just a quick question. We had a discussion in the school district about the fund balance during the last budget. There was a question about going below 5 to 10% in order to get to a 0% tax increase. I was wondering what your position might be on the fund balance. Would you be willing to go below the recommended Moody's, the different financial institution out there, in order to get to a 0% tax increase if it came down to that? Just curious what you might think of that.
Oh, that's the question, though. If it came down to that, I think there's things that need to be looked at in the budget. And again, coming from private industry, there's things, one of the things I noticed that when we go out and we put a budget together, things that are in the budget don't necessarily need to be spent. And one of the things that I find with, not necessarily this school district, but things that are put in the budget, if we don't use it, we're going to lose it. And I did a lot of stuff with government contracts, and it really kind of burns me that, oh, if we don't use this money this year, we're not going to get it next year. And I think that approach needs to change, because one of the ways we can save money and save the taxpayers money is if we don't need to do this year, if this did not break this year, or we don't need this piece of equipment this year, then it goes rolled over to the next year. And then your fund balance shouldn't be an issue. To answer your question, but
It sort of does. If it came down to it, would you be willing to go below the recommended numbers of the?
again, that's a hard question to answer without seeing the numbers.
That's fine.
But it would, something would have to be evaluated at the time.
Thank you.
Well,
I have a question. Well, I don't know. You can go with it. That was my main concern.
Senior citizens on a fixed income and loss in pensions are having difficulty making tax payments. Will you be able to help them? Is that
Yeah,
what you
something, yeah. So what are your thoughts on that?
well, my parents are both 79. My dad was a surgeon. And the pension money that he put away as a surgeon, he's not getting the pension that some of these that are being paid out through government contracts right now. I think anything that can be done to help that is a positive. My first years outside of college, I was in the UAW with Mack Trucks. We gave concessions to try to keep Mack here. Unions can give concessions. There's things that can be done to save money. I think as a whole, we need to look at these things to see where we can save money. And the other thing is, being a homeowner, I have 10 years left to pay off my mortgage, and it does burn me that I'm basically, if I don't pay my real estate tax after paying my house for 30 years, I could lose it. And that's something I'd like to see changed. There is a bill out there in Pennsylvania, HB 76. They're looking at trying to remove that burden from the homeowner, and I'm all for that.
Any other questions? Would you like to make a concluding remark?
Yeah, one thing I think there's a lot of concerns that are going on right now. Today, like I said, we're in probably the worst, toughest economic times that we have been in since the Depression, and it doesn't seem like it's going to change for a couple of years. And I think to try to keep business as usual is not going to work, and we need to look at how we can improve things. And that's what I'm all about, is thinking outside the box and how we can improve things. I also want to tell people, and this is what I plan on doing, is going for school board. when I'm meeting with people and meeting with my community, get out there and contact your elected officials. People say, oh, I can't do this, my vote doesn't matter. Well, it does. And this is one of the main reasons I'm doing what I'm doing right now, why I'm here in front of you, is because I want to make a difference, and I'm going to show those people that say I can't make a difference that you can indeed make a difference. So please, anyway, whatever it's, you're with me or you're not with me, keep in touch with your elected officials and make your opinions known.
Thank you very much.
And next we have Mr. Earnshaw. Mr. Earnshaw.
Well, good evening, everybody. When I moved into the district, my oldest daughter, was 5 years old. She just started kindergarten before we moved to Michigan. We arrived here and I was asked to consider running for the school board. So I did run that year. When I was elected, she was a first grader. This year she graduates from high school. And I'm really looking forward to the opportunity I have to shake her hand and give her a hug and hand her her diploma folder as she walks across that stage. When it comes to school boards, that's where the rewards are. The rewards are seeing the achievements of the students, seeing their growth, seeing the things that they accomplish. We have some amazing students in East Penn. We had a young lady who graduated last year who was doing cancer research at Lehigh University. This is graduate level cancer research as a high school senior. And she was publishing her work in scholarly reviewed journals. These are some of the caliber of students that we turn out. Last year we had 12 National Merit semifinalists. That's based on their PSAT scores. All 12 of those students went on to become finalists in the National Merit competition. In all of Lehigh County, there were only 24 students who were National Merit semifinalists, half of them from Emmaus High School. So we've done a marvelous job of educating our students. And at the same time, we always hear the concerns about the spending. When I was elected to the school board almost 12 years ago, East Penn was spending a significantly higher amount per student on average based on the state than we are today. We were 176th of 501 school districts on per student spending. We've now dropped that to 275th of 500 school districts. 2 school districts merged a couple of years ago. So now we're spending 6.9% below the state average on per student costs. We've done a remarkable job of controlling costs and of delivering those savings to the taxpayers. Now, why don't we see it? Well, one of the challenges is we're also 450th of 500 school districts in per student funding from the state. So if we were to go up to the average, just the average state funding per student, we'd be able to reduce the property tax by 30% today. So as a result, we as taxpayers in East Penn not only are paying the local school taxes, but through our income taxes and our sales taxes, we're subsidizing education throughout the rest of the state. Now that's largely because Pennsylvania is one of only 3 states in the country that has no funding formula for state funding. It's done at the whim of the legislature. So we have that challenge of how do we manage our funding, how do we control those costs and balance those needs while continuing to provide an excellent education. I think we're doing a pretty good job walking that tightrope. There's always things we can do more, and we continue to work on those. But for right now, we're delivering an outstanding program for an outstanding school district.
Any questions from the audience for Mr. Earnshaw? Okay, we'll revisit one of the ones that came up earlier. As a present school board member, what have you done to get webcasting of school board meetings implemented, and to address one of the concerns by Mr. Donatelli, wading through the weeds so that the public can become an informed public?
Well, you've got really 2 different issues there. One is the length of the school board meetings. The only way to make that manageable is to edit in some fashion. Break it up into smaller pieces, We've heard people that don't want it edited. The real challenge that we've faced is the federal law called FERPA. That's the Family Educational Rights to Privacy Act. That requires school districts to hold certain information confidential about students. So if we had a parent stand up in public comment and make comments about their students' grades, about disciplinary actions, we cannot disclose that information even though the public or the member of the public has disclosed it to us. And we could potentially be facing a significant lawsuit under federal law for breaching that Privacy Act. That's the real concern we have with broadcasting unedited webcast videos. That's why we're looking for an opinion from our solicitor to make sure that we would not be assuming substantial liability as a public entity in making those videos available. Now, I have no objection to making them available. I do object to diverting public dollars for doing that when those dollars are needed for other really more critical things as part of our core mission of educating students. But if we can find a way to do it inexpensively, and we can find a way to avoid the potential minefields of federal and state privacy laws, then I certainly would support it.
As a follow-up to that response that you just made to Mr. Earnshaw, school board meetings are public meetings. And when, as such, are you saying then that federal law says that a public meeting isn't a public meeting?
No, I'm saying that federal law prohibits a school district from disseminating information against federal law. And so that's the question. If we publish a video of the meeting where any of that student information is made a public, spoken in the public, would we potentially be liable? The costs of fighting that lawsuit or settling that lawsuit are substantially higher than the costs of paying for broadcasting.
You understand the question that I'm asking you, sir. It's a public meeting now, so any member of the public would see what takes place at a public meeting. What is wrong with a public meeting being broadcast so that the rest of the public sees what takes place in the public?
I have to interject.
I think I've explained that already.
Made his point, whether we agree with it is not.
Just asking a follow-up.
Please?
Yeah, Mr. Earnshaw, you've been here for 12 years, and there are some people that say that you're being soft with the union, and you're not looking after the best interests of the taxpayer or the private citizen. What do you have to say about that?
Well, first, it's interesting that someone would have an assumption about the softness who's not been a party to the negotiations. So I can tell you from personal experience that those negotiations are very tense, and they can get very acrimonious at times, just like all union negotiations. When we go into each of those negotiation sessions, we have a set of parameters that the board develops, what we're willing to give and what we want to get from the union. Those are developed by consensus in private, because to give away your negotiating strategy in public, of course, is foolish. The union we're negotiating with, whether it's the teachers union or the Teamsters who represent custodians, the food crafters union or the administrative assistants and educational assistants, they come to us as well with objectives that they have. The union always has the opportunity to present their case. We have the opportunity to present ours. We get some of the things that we want, they get some of the things that they want, and neither side gets everything they want, ever. We've always had negotiations where we've gotten some things we really wanted, and when we haven't gotten some things we really wanted. That's the way negotiations work. In every case where a school board in this area has held firm on no increase for the teachers, it's ended up with strikes, with teachers with no contract working for a year or two, like in Saucon Valley, and then retroactive raises anyway. So I've never seen a successful negotiating tactic saying we will not give an increase to our teachers. If it would work here, I'm not sure why it would be different here than elsewhere, but we certainly negotiate very hard. We spend a lot of time and a lot of effort. And to say we're going easy on them, of course, I don't know how one would come to that conclusion.
Depends whether you have a $30,000 income or a bigger income.
In the back, please.
What's the status of the pension costs?
The pension fund for school employees is PSERS, the Public School Employees Retirement System. That's a retirement benefit that was established by the state legislature and is mandated by the state. The legislature has an actuarial group that works with the PSERS pension fund to determine what kind of increase in contributions need to be made by all the employers, school districts in this case. The legislature has, on a few occasions over the last 10 years, decided to change the actuarial formula to reduce the increases, to spread out those costs further. All of those decisions are made at the legislative level. School boards have no input and no control. We can't simply opt out. I'd certainly like to. I have personally lobbied our legislators on several occasions asking them to enact pension reform. We have a Republican governor and a Republican-controlled legislature in both houses. They haven't brought legislation up for a vote that would do anything for pension reform. I really wish they would, because we desperately need it in the state. But those are mandated costs that we can't simply say, we can't afford it, we don't like it. I wish we could get out of it, but we can't.
Please.
Specifically, how is the Penn district funded? Are you behind or are you ahead? Because not all districts pay what they should pay. So specifically, where is the Penn district relative to funding?
The district, it is not a separate entity as a member of the pension fund. It is a statewide thing. All districts and charter schools in the Commonwealth pay in at the same rate. All of their employees have the same benefits and options, and the liabilities are not broken out by school district. It's done as a whole pension system.
Another question?
Yeah. I'm just going to say.
Go ahead, that's fine.
Isn't it true that the pension fund is part of the state fund, as you said, so that a teacher who would leave, it's very difficult to get rid of a teacher, first of all. Once you've gone through the motions of getting the teacher, they could go to another state organization and get the same pension. It can be transferred within certain times.
Since for the public school employees, it is
part of the
a state fund.
So they may
that's
not
correct.
even lose that fund if they get let go.
Correct. So as an employee may earn 5 years of credit in one district, and then 10 years in another one, and then 8 years in a third district, and that all adds up to that same pension, because it's one system for the whole state.
But isn't it true, though, if they are let go, that they may lose part of their pension if they're not vested?
The pension vests in 5 years, so if they've had 5 years of service, they're vested at that point. If they terminate employment, either voluntarily or involuntarily, before 5 years, they get no pension benefit at all. And then the pension is calculated based on their years of service and their salary. So the more years they work and the higher salary they earn, the greater the pension benefit when they do retire.
We talked a lot, oh, I'm sorry, there's another question.
Sorry, one of the concerns I have about local elections, especially school board elections, is that whatever donations people are receiving are within that district, within East Penn School District. What are your feelings on that? Do you take money from outside of the school district as part of your campaigns?
I have not. In my first campaign, it was an unopposed election. There were 4 candidates for 4 seats. I didn't raise money. I spent a few dollars to notarize some paperwork, and that was it. In my first re-election campaign, I financed that personally. In my second campaign, I did accept donations from a couple of people who live in the district who are not employees of the school, nor are they teachers, nor do they derive any income from the state education system in any way. In this cycle, I have not accepted donations from anyone else. The election laws permit it. It's up to each person to decide whether they consider that to be an ethical thing or a proper thing for someone to accept money from interests outside the district.
If I may, I'd like to ask a question about, you addressed the growth in the district, particularly in the western part of the district, Lower Macungie. That it's inevitable that there will be students coming from that part of the district. As a school board member, what are you doing to be proactive to prepare for that eventuality? You address the issue that the school board really has very little taxing leeway. But are there other measures that you might take or recommend taking? Excuse me.
Yeah, the challenge we have is when houses are built, we don't know how many students will come and we don't know how quickly they will come. We've had divisions that have been built with, say, 300 new homes that have contributed 20 or 30 students that first year, and then more the next year and more the next year. When the division called the Hills at Lockridge was completed, that's near Albertus on the western side of Lower McCountry Township, those were built out very quickly, and in a single year we had 460 new students move into the district. Now, our prior experience in the district was growth. A big year was about 100 to 120 students. So to have 460 students move in a single year, suddenly where we thought we had about 5 years of capacity in our elementary schools, we filled that capacity and had to build another school quickly, and that's why we built the Willow Lane School. To prepare for that, we do know that new homes are coming. We don't know when they'll start, even though they have been approved. It can take sometimes years before they actually pour the foundations, begin the building process. So what we've done to prepare for that is we have acquired property in Lower McCountry Township on the west of 100, there at Sauerkraut Lane. That property can accommodate 2 schools. We also have potential to build a second school on the West Baseville site if we can deal with the traffic issues there. So we feel that we do have some opportunities to build additional schools if that becomes necessary. We really would like to avoid doing that for as long as possible. New schools are expensive, and the cost for building those schools are never offset by the taxes that are paid by the new homes. It just, the math doesn't work out that way. We are also prohibited from assessing any kind of impact fee for developers. I know some states do that. Developers either pay funds or contribute land for schools as part of their development. In Pennsylvania, there are only 2 kinds of impact fees that can be charged. One is for traffic improvements, so that would be things like traffic intersections, lights, and crosswalks. And the other one is for recreational use, for example, new parks. Those are both controlled by the municipal body that approves the development, the township or the borough. So the school district is unfortunately at the mercy of the planners in each of the municipalities, and we have to take whatever they give to us, and we have to work with it as best we can, and sometimes that's challenging.
Any other questions from the audience?
Yes. Has the school board ever considered addressing that issue that you just alluded to with the state reps, the state senators in Harrisburg that changed that law so that the developers need to participate in the development?
We actually have. About 2 years ago, we had a meeting with all the legislators that represent school districts in Lehigh County, and we brought this issue up to them. Some of the legislators said they supported it. Others said, well, I think it's a good idea here, but there are school districts in the central part of the state where they desperately want growth, and their legislators would oppose it, so it's dead in the water, so I don't think I should bother getting behind this. But yeah, we did advocate for that. We did request it. There was a bill that was proposed, but it never went anywhere.
Anyone else? And Mr. Urcha, if you'd like to make a few concluding remarks, you have actually about 5 minutes, so if you'd like to ramble, you can, but I would recommend.
I'll try not to. So one of the great privileges of being a public servant on a school board is that it truly is public service. There's no compensation for school board directors. It's only that feeling of satisfaction you get when seeing the accomplishments of the students, as I mentioned earlier. It's a position that takes a tremendous amount of time and effort to prepare for those meetings, to attend the meetings, and to work through the issues that come up. One of the things that we've occasionally been accused of is being a rubber stamp. And that's an interesting comment. We've worked very carefully with the superintendent to hire and evaluate the superintendent on the criteria that we feel are important. So when the superintendent is doing our will that we've specifically given to him through instruction and through his evaluation criteria, we approve the things he brings to us. It's not rubber stamping because he's doing what we've asked him to do. We've also had many occasions with our union negotiations where we've been accused of giving in to the superintendent's wishes. The superintendent never participates in union negotiations. I think that's smart on his part since he has to have working relationships with all of the bargaining unit members. So he does not participate in those negotiations. Of course, we work with the superintendent to develop our strategies, but we don't have him sitting on it nor making recommendations to us. The complexity of a school district has been a source of continual amazement to me. I work in the corporate world, I work for Air Products, and we have lots of different levers that we can pull when we have to change our cost structure. We can lay off employees. We can change pricing to specific customers to reflect the costs of doing business with them. We can stop offering products or services that are not profitable anymore. School districts can't do those things. We can't lay off professional employees by law unless we completely eliminate the program. So that's why the district in Allentown has proposed eliminating art and music. They can't just say, no, we're going to have bigger third grade classes, so let's lay off a couple of third grade teachers. And we're going to have bigger math and science classes in the high school, so lay off a couple of teachers there. They can't do that by law. So they do the only thing they can do, which is eliminate programs. We've been able to avoid doing that in East Penn, fortunately. But it's been a challenge. All those levers I'm used to using in the corporate world have gone away. Every family pays their taxes, whether they have no children, whether they have many children, whether they have regular ed children or special ed children. One price covers all. The costs don't fit the model. So as a public good, the legislature has established school districts and established funding mechanisms that are supported and borne by the entire populace. And that's what we work with, that model. There are lots of other models that have been proposed. I'd love to see some of those. I'm especially concerned, though, whenever someone proposes eliminating property taxes, since we have no funding formula in place. And we don't know what kind of funding the state would give us from year to year. A precursor, I think, to eliminating property taxes or reducing them would have to be having that formula in place so that districts can know what to rely on in their funding from year to year. The last thing I'd like to say is I welcome comments at any time. I've got a public district email address that's on the East Penn School District website. My phone number is in the phone book. You can call me. Please try not to call me after 9. My kids do like to sleep. Surprisingly enough, I have a teenager who's out like a light at 9 o'clock. It's a very refreshing thing. One teenager out of 4. But yeah, call me anytime if you have questions, if you have concerns, if you have ideas and suggestions. We'd love to hear them. We know we don't have all the answers. And we know that the only way we can get better solutions is by getting more ideas in the front door. So please contact me anytime. And thanks for your time this evening.
Thank you.
We do have a couple of minutes, so if you'd like to take a 3-minute break just to stretch your legs or so on before our next presenter.
Hold on.
I would create my 3 minutes.
What's that?
Yeah, and actually, just put that on the side. If you got out of
Okay, our next presenter is Mr. Garrett Rhodes.
Thank you, Bob. I'd like to publicly acknowledge Bob Overly's efforts that he put into the questionnaire, Mr. Donchez for videotaping, Mr. Ziegenfuss for lending us his MC setup and giving us the rocky music, and also Carol Allen and Joanne in the back that have all donated their time to make this a success. Just a little bit of my background. For those of you in the room who don't know me, my name is Garrett Rhodes. I've lived in the Lower McCountry Township in the East Penn School District for 37 of my 40 years. I'm a product of the East Penn School District. I went to Lehigh University, left after my second year to start my own first company. Since then, I have started many. Some have been successful, quite a few have been successful. In any case, having grown up in the East Penn School District, I decided to stay. And I've done a lot of traveling in my lifetime in business, and I've never really seen a reason to leave. And I feel that this is my home, and it's time for me to step up, much like Mr. Donatelli had correctly pointed out earlier. It's time to start giving back to the community in the form of service. My wife, I imported my wife from New Jersey, which seems to be quite common in this area. So we've been living here now for, 19 years. I do have 2 children in the district. I have a 12-year-old who's a 5th grader at Lower Country Middle School. I have a 4th grader at Willow Lane Elementary School. And my reason for wanting to run for school board is, having attended many meetings over the last year, I noticed that a lot of times personal agendas and old emotional scars that go on between certain people tend to kind of muddy the water, and it kind of interferes with the process of what's going on in the school district. And in my personal opinion, I think that at the end of the day, it hurts the education of our children. So my number one thing that I hope to accomplish as your school board member is to try to work with the other school board members rather than against them. That's first, because if we don't work together, we're not going to accomplish anything. That being said, I think what we should really do as part of that agenda is to include the public more in what goes on. We've had recent examples of people's frustrations that go on when that doesn't happen. And I think if we were to make a conscious effort to include the public more, that's what I talk to people about when I go around door to door, is we really want more input in what goes on. And I think if we change a little bit of the structure about how the school board meetings are structured, that people will have that input. Because a lot of times, if you get enough input, people come up with some really good ideas. The other thing I want to focus on, of course, is being a better steward of the tax dollars in which we are already given. Now, there's been a number of candidates up here who have talked about, there are mandates and certain things that we can't change and we have to fund. And that's true. You can't not fund public schools. You can't kill it. When you kill a school and kill an education, the community goes down. When the community goes down, people that can afford to leave. Allentown is a living example of that. We've all watched it happen. But there are a lot of areas I feel that we could do better in particular, a lot of administrative spending. And I can get into that in more detail if people want to. But those are my purposes in wanting to run. And I think there's a lot we can do as school board members to publicly advocate for better spending from the state. Mr. Earnshaw made an excellent point about there not being a fair formula for funding. We do not get our fair share of money from the state, given the tax dollars that we pay in. How do we fix that? And, as an individual board member, you can talk to a legislator, but the only effective way to change a legislator's mind is to get to the legislator's voters. So in my mind, as a school board director, I intend to be a regular public advocate and citizen activist as a board member out there, not only once elected, but after elected, continuing to knock on doors, continuing to go to community and public events, doing petition drives, because when your state legislators know that you have 5,000 signatures on a petition from their district for a certain thing, they're going to push for it. And so I don't just have flowery ideas of working with the legislators, I actually have a plan on how to do it.
Mr. Rhodes, questions from the floor? Okay. One question that was asked before was about webcasting school board meetings, and Mr. Earnshaw brought up a issue that may be in violation of a federal statute. Are you in favor, and how would you handle the objection were brought to you?
Actually, I'm a big advocate of as much transparency as possible. Mr. Earnshaw does bring up an excellent point about civil liability, and I believe he said that this school solicitor is looking into whether or not they would be subject to that FERPA law. And if they are, then they do need to find out whether or not they're open to that civil liability. FERPA aside, yes, I would like to see webcasting, and in fact, Mr. Donchez has already been doing it for free. Because he's not with the school district, he's not subject to that civil liability. So the school board meetings are already being recorded and broadcast on the internet, unedited. So that is already occurring. Would I be for the school district doing it? Only if it were done in a cost-effective manner for that very reason. I mean, we have to have an audio-visual club in the high school. We have to own the equipment already. We have servers. Goodness knows we have the bandwidth. Would we really need to go and hire an outside entity? Or could we work with students that are already in the district? Give them a project to work on. Something they can put on a college resume.
Fair enough. Any other questions from the floor? Okay, there's a follow-up to... I'm sorry, I apologize, I didn't see you. Please.
Jared, how do you feel about 1776 as a way to change the funding process for education?
Well, I think we're all familiar with the problem we're having of ever-increasing real estate taxes because it's the only avenue that the district currently has to make up any shortfalls in revenue. So they're often forced into this situation, whether they want to be or not. In certain situations, yes, others no. As far as HB 76 is concerned, I think it's a great idea because you'd be looking at adding a lot more money into the schools without raising real estate taxes to the point where people that don't have good paying jobs, seniors who are living on a fixed income, don't get kicked out of their homes. Now, it needs to be done in an intelligent way. Just as Mr. Earnshaw pointed out, there needs to be a structured formula. Otherwise, we're going to get left holding the bag like we are now. But I am a strong advocate for changing the way we fund our schools in this state. Absolutely.
Thank you for pointing that out.
Sir?
Mr. Rhodes, in regards to cyber charter schools in Pennsylvania, I've seen a number of statistics that we pay more for cyber charter funding. There's a lot of for-profit companies out there like K-12 that are making a lot of money that's going towards advertising and lobbying the government. There's been some suggestion of possibly changing that formula to actually be more, okay, here's what it costs to educate students, here's what we're willing to pay at that level for that. Kind of similar to what local school districts, if they have their own cyber charter school, maybe it would be similar to that cost. Governor Porter cut the 30% reimbursement for the public schools. I'm just curious what your philosophy or feeling is on any of the proposals out there to change some of the cyber charter and charter funding formulas, if you had any feelings on that, without taking choice away from anybody. That's not what I'm asking. I support ed choice too, but just funding formula alone, period.
Well, as far as any existing legislation that's going on right now for changing that, I really don't know exactly what that is, but I can find out. But as far as where I stand on that issue, yes, I think the way that we instituted the charter school system in the state, there were some unintended consequences, and that, of course, being that cyber charter schools get reimbursed the same amount as a brick and mortar school. And that's just not right. Because cyber charter schools are so much less expensive to operate. That's why online college programs are so popular. It's so cheap to go. Now, I'm not against someone making an honest dollar, but I think that's a loophole that we really do need to close because I actually have two neighbors of mine who live on the same street that I do. They have, one neighbor has 3 children. 2 of them are at-home cyber charter schooled. And one goes to the school because they have a special education need. And they almost think it's funny the amount of money that we're paying the cyber charter school. And I argue with them about it all the time. I'm like, look, I don't mind funding your cyber charter school, but at a reasonable rate. You know, we're not an unlimited source of funds. You're talking about dollars that can go back into brick and mortar operations, which, let's face it, we all know we need. It's money that we'd be able to continue to fund the schools without, once again, having to raise taxes.
Hey, Carrie, you're the head of the East Penn Business Owners Network, which is sort of a mini chamber of commerce from what I can gather. What's the number one complaint or issue that you're dealing that some of the business owners are asking you to deal with as a new school board member? What's the overriding thing they talk about?
Oh, without a doubt, it's taxes.
Okay.
Unequivocally, it's taxes. We have 2 of our members here in this area who shall remain nameless, who have already said that as soon as their kids are graduating, they're gone. Because they've watched their taxes go up, 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 up. And I'm not pointing fingers as to why, it's just the reality that it's happening. And they're so frustrated. You know, they have 1 child left in the district who will graduate in the next year or 2, and they've already said, I'm going to pick up my business and I'm moving 45 minutes north.
In the back?
What's your view of incorporating more of the cyber subjects into the curriculum of the regular school versus having IU or a charter school?
I think that would be a great thing for public education. It's definitely the way our society is going. It's the way business is going. If you're in business today and you don't know how to use things like Meetup, Facebook, but more importantly, GoToMeeting.com, shared presentations, you're in trouble. So I think incorporating some of that cyber learning or cyber seminars into public education would, number one, provide our students a better exposure to technology and how business and the workplace is going to operate in the future. But it also presents us an incredible opportunity to reduce the cost of educating our children without damaging the quality of the education that they're getting.
Anyone else? I'd like to ask a question about the follow-up on the charter schools, private schools, parochial schools. In the Netherlands, the funding follows the child to whatever school the parent gets an allowance. This is how much you can spend on education, spend it where you want. Is there a model for that in the United States? Or specifically East Penn?
No. I don't know how they operate their public school system in the Netherlands. I really have no idea. But what we know about our public schools, particularly here in East Penn, is that we are required to provide certain services. And I'm going to use special education just as an example because it's a big one. We have to provide those special education services regardless. So I would assume that maybe if the state were funding the public schools 100%, without splitting the cost of that funding with local governments and communities, they could assign a certain amount of money to that special education student. But as far as how we would do that here in our existing public school system, under the laws and the regulations that we operate our school, I have no idea how we would be able to implement that. I really don't.
I have a question since you keep on bringing up special education. I'm not very up on this, but I kind of heard that East Penn has one of the best special educations, that people come from other school districts to go to East Penn. Is that true? And are we funding it as taxpayers of East Penn?
Yes, and yes.
Okay. I thought I heard that.
I've spoken with many newer members of the community who have flat out told me that they have moved into the East Penn School District because the quality of our special education program is that high. It's a free country. You can't tell them that you can't move here. So.
There was also another question that came up about senior citizens on fixed income. As a director of the school board, is there any specific actions that you can take or advocacy that you would undertake to reduce the burden on senior citizens?
Well, the only action I would have as a school board director would to be an advocate. As was already pointed out earlier tonight, changing the tax laws are not under the purview of the school board. But would I be a strong advocate to our state legislator to do a handful of things? Number one, HB 76 has already been mentioned tonight. I'm a really big advocate of that. I would be willing to go around and get 10,000 signatures on a petition for it if it were done responsibly. We do already have a seniors tax rebate program. It's good for a few $100 a year. It's really not that effective to someone who's trying to live on a fixed income, and Social Security is not going to increase anytime too soon. So that is a really big problem. It's one of the reasons why I support changing the way we fund schools so much, is because it's unfair for someone to move into a community, start a family, work a career, own a business, whatever they do for a vocation, raise their children in a district, retire, pay for college, and look forward to their golden years only to find out that when they get to be 65, 70 years old, their taxes are more than the value of the house when they bought it 35 years ago on an annual basis. And I think that's an injustice in our system today.
So John, you're writing something out, or you just want to speak?
It'll be for later.
Fair enough. Anyone else? Okay, if you want to make some concluding remarks, please do.
No, I'm good. I'll save everybody's time. Thank you.
regular meetings run short. Our next presenter is Rebecca Hyde. Ms. Hyde was not able to get the answers to the questions that you all have in your packet to me in time for them to be printed up. So what I'm going to ask her to do is, after she makes her introductory statement, to please go over her view on each one of the questions in brief, and obviously we'll have the floor open for questions after she's finished. Thank you.
Hello everybody, I'm Rebecca Hyde. I was born and raised in Emmaus and product of the school system here. I left for about 2 years, but always find your way back. It's home. I have experience in the private sector and also the public sector. I've worked at 3 colleges at this point, and before that I worked with Sodexo and Aramark and Restaurant Associates. I don't think there's anything else you really need to know about me at this point. A lot of you know me in this room. Very different from a lot of the candidates in the sense that I tend to listen to both views. Very Christian. I belong to the Emmaus Moravian Church, and that really kind of makes me base my decisions on if I would want something done to me. And I try to practice that because it's very difficult. You have to keep in mind when you're sitting up there and you hear individuals telling you, please, raise the taxes because we want to keep a great school system. And then you have individuals saying, I can't pay my bills, please don't raise the taxes. So where do you find a happy medium? And that's the most difficult part, because at the end of the day, we all have to sleep and we have to live with our decisions. And then I'll quickly go over all the questions here. What is your stance for charter, private, and free schools? My personal opinion is I really don't mind where people choose to send their children. I just feel that there has to be a policy set that it's funded properly. My other issue at this point is I really don't think necessarily that charter schools are at the full potential that we are at in the public sector. We are doing a fantastic job. Do I see the future for charter schools? Absolutely. But at this point, our education stance is really great in the East Penn. And with the charter school, I'm a firm believer we offer a great charter school through our district. I really don't think our students should go anywhere else. We offer one, and they can get their degree through East Penn. With the books, the electric Kool-Aid and electric Kool-Aid and prep. I read prep. A big proponent on the First Amendment, and from all the research that I've done, they weren't forced to read these books. These were on a separate list. And I think the person who made the biggest impact on me at the school board meeting was when I had a parent stand up and state, I read every single book that's on my child's list, and I read this book, and I okayed it for her to read and to come talk to me. The parent's role is a huge part in our school district. Okay. Let's see what else we have here. The population aspect, I'm a huge proponent of hybrid courses. We're doing a lot in higher ed. It's something that we should continue to look at in our school system now. So you can do some online as well as the brick and mortar. And we really do have to look at our population. We are planning for it. We're hoping that it doesn't extend too much, but we do have plans, and I'm totally with Ellen Urshaw in the sense I don't want to build. And I definitely don't want a second high school. I'm very much against that. To reduce or control spending in the district, I believe that how the superintendent's going about, we're looking at our transportation aspect. We should continuously look at our transportation. I'd like to opt in, opt out. I know when I went to high school, I did not take the bus 11th or 12th grade at all, and they still would have to go past a certain area and stop. So I really think we can look at certain aspects. And negotiations, my biggest thing that I would look at for negotiations is definitely the medical benefits and how much we're participating towards it. And the other aspect is, we do this at Northampton Community College, that if your spouse has insurance, they are not covered by your insurance through Northampton Community College. And yet they have and if they are going to go underneath your insurance, you have to sign basically saying that they do not have a position that offers insurance. But however, you have to keep in mind, you have children, parents who have to provide health insurance for their children, will perform for that. But if you have a spouse who can get insurance through their company, they should be taking advantage of that. Health insurance initially started just for that individual who was working for that company. The Common Core, I have to say I have to do a lot of research on it. From what we have already started Common Core standards in our district, and we've used it for English and I think some science. At this point, I can't say I'm having any problem with the curriculum. I think where we're going to hit major problems with this is reading lists. I've heard that the state government and federal government are saying what should be read. I think that takes away from our environment as a community, and I think it takes away from the teacher and what they can provide in a system. So the Common Core, I really have to do a lot more research, but I think we implemented maybe 10 last time it was about 3. I think it's maybe 10 total. So we have implemented some with our math and sciences already. Any questions of this?
Questions from the audience? Yeah. Oh, Jim, please.
I have a question, if you could clarify, going back to the reading list. I'm a proponent of the Constitution and a big supporter of the Bill of Rights, and I really support the First Amendment. However, I find it a little odd to justify sexually explicit materials being exposed to children as young as maybe 12 and 13 years old, even if a certain parent might find it acceptable. Could you clarify just a little why you find that it's okay to expose children at that age to sexually explicit material?
I'm not saying it's okay by all means, but you have to keep in mind that this is a book list that is developed by teachers. It's okayed by a whole line of aspects. And then, basically then in the end, if someone has a problem with the book, you go through a system, you follow policies and procedures to get it removed. And that's where we come in as a school board to say, and listen to it and say, okay, well then we're going to move this up to a different level, or we're going to take it off totally. So once again, we have policies and procedures there that implement that we can follow and we can listen to the public then. So that's my firm belief. Listen to the public and see what their outcome is. And most of you were there. It was very heated. A lot of you for it, a lot of you against it. And the lady dropped the 1, and then the other thing we added to a different age group. And we haven't heard anything from that. And once again, if individuals have issues with that, it's something that you come and bring to the school board.
Yes, Ms. Hyde, I see that you, Mr. Earnshaw, Mr. Munson, Mr. Moxley are all endorsed by a group called Citizens for Strong Communities. Some in the area consider this group to be leftist, liberal, and pro-democratic, with that group having a web link on the White House web page, Citizens for Strong Communities. It's the Obama White House. How do you reconcile that with the fact that you're seeking a Republican endorsement?
Well, very simple. I didn't go out to ask him to endorse me. I think I met him in person one time. He emailed me once and I never emailed back. And I heard from someone else that he was endorsing me. That's up to him. That's free will.
You know who's him?
Patrick Slattery. So that's up to him. If people want to endorse me, I'm not going to say no, and I was never asked. So it doesn't matter to me if people like my views. And like I said, I'm going more in the independent round these days because I think there's radicals on either end.
Sir?
Just to clarify, you never filled out a questionnaire, you never had a phone conversation, there was nothing ever asking you, please be on our slate or ticket, or there was nothing like that?
No.
From anybody?
No,
Okay,
no,
so-
I am totally independent from any group. I am running 100% independent.
Very good.
Anything else from the floor? It's a new question. And I'll ad-lib a little bit just to flesh out the question, if I may. But the school board seems to do its business on deck, so as a so would you consider breaking down some of the functionality of the school board to committees? For example, a budget committee, a curriculum committee?
I know in the past they have them. We do that at LCTI. We break down in committees. I have no problem doing that. We would just probably meet about once a month. That's what I would hold it to. You have to keep in mind that we do put our heart and soul in this. I read my packet constantly. We mark up everything. I sit next to Lynn Donchez and I see her papers. And if we find something that a committee that's opened up to us, I'm sure all of us wouldn't have a problem at all joining a committee.
I think the question was more to splitting the responsibility.
Yes, splitting the responsibility, right, which we call subcommittees, basically, which we would have a committee that would work on the budget, and then we would have a committee that would work maybe more on the curriculum end. Like I said, we do that at LCTI, we break it down to the education, the marketing, and then what we do is at our meetings, we present what we did in those groups.
And this question has come up before about webcasting of the school board meetings. And do you have any particular thing?
I have no
Objection?
problem with it. I have no problem with it. I just cannot see any additional aspects that are in the ones that were proposed to us. I was a little shocked with the price. I think we have to look at different aspects to see if we can get it at a cost that's not going to be enormous. And I don't understand. I know that Easton does it. I asked the superintendent to look in that, and we're still trying to get information in essence. But I have no problem if they're webcasted.
Questions? Sir?
Yes, in any of the 5 municipalities that are part of the East Penn School District, when development projects is going through the pipeline, strictly voluntarily, they submit their plans to a regional planning body, the LPPC, the Southwest Comprehensive Plan. Do you feel as though, say for example, if there's a development change where an ordinance goes through the change zoning amendment from say commercial to allow residential or previously not allowed, obviously that's a choice that affects the school district. Do you think as though, say, a voluntary organization such as Southwest Comp Plan, that the school district should have a seat at that table and some input in those decisions?
Oh, absolutely. But once again, we sit here and say, don't tax us on our property, then we're going to tell other people, oh wait, you can't subdivide, even though you've owned this property for how many years. So, you know, it's once again, it's a catch-22. So do I think we should sit on those boards? Yes, because we need to have a heads up about how many people are coming in, what we're projecting. But once again, who am I to tell you, oh, you have a 50-acre farm and you want to retire and you want to subdivide? Oh no, you can't now. No.
Anyone else? If you'd like to make a closing statement?
I don't really have anything else to say. You can always email me. A lot of you in this room know my opinions. I've really enjoyed, I have to say, the last 2 years on the board. I've had more open communication with board members, the superintendent. I'm getting a handle more on the budget process, and I appreciate your time tonight. Thank you.
Why don't we take a 3-minute break? Just there are cookies in the back, sodas. In the back, please, please take your seats. Our last presenter this evening is Dr. Zian Munson. Dr. Munson.
Thank you, Bob, for organizing this. I know some others have thanked others, but you're the only person I've actually had contact with about this. But I appreciate the opportunity to meet you all. Unlike many of the other candidates, I know almost no one. I'm a newcomer to this, and compared to some of the other candidates, I'm a newcomer to this community. I've lived here only 10 years. And so I thought maybe it's more incumbent upon me than perhaps some of the other candidates to tell you a little bit about myself. I actually grew up in northern Minnesota and went to some great public schools through high school, and they afforded me enormous opportunities in my life. And some of those opportunities include the educational training I've had. I attended college at the University of Chicago, and I received my PhD from Harvard University, and I now am on the faculty at Lehigh University. When we moved to the Lehigh Valley, the very first thing I did, like hundreds of other people that I've met in this area, is we looked at the schools. And that's how we decided where to buy a house. And the very first place we looked was in West End, Allentown. And as many of you may know, there is a little piece of West End, Allentown that is carved out in the, I don't know if I can say it here, if I can use the P word, but it's the Parkland School District. And the amazing thing about that neighborhood is if you look at a house in the Parkland School District that might be worth $300,000, and then you cross the street into the Allentown School District and look at a house that was built at the same time, is in the same condition, and has the same sorts of features, you find a house that's worth half the one on the other side of the street. The only difference is the quality of the schools. And that really left an impression on me about where the importance was in defining what our property values are and where I want to live in the Lehigh Valley. And we ultimately chose the East Penn School District, not a particular city, but the East Penn School District because of the schools. So we lived in Roanoke Township for about 5 years before moving to Emmaus. And now I've lived in Emmaus right near the Triangle for the last 5 years. One of the things that I think has been very useful about the questions and answers that we've had thus far is everyone's been able to see how incredibly limited the role is of school board members in defining how much school districts have to spend. It was an incredibly deflating sort of realization to me when I did some training by the EPLC that helps with prospective school board members understand the budgeting process. That there are all of these regulations and mandates that are passed by the federal government, and particularly politicians in Harrisburg. And we as local taxpayers are simply told to pay for them. And the school board serves lots of purposes, but one of those purposes is to be a group that are the whipping boys for the people in Harrisburg, who can pass laws and then require the local school board members to take responsibility for paying for them. Why I'm running for school board is because I want to focus on some of the things that the school board members actually do have a great deal of control over. And that is the educational mission and direction of the schools. We don't spend enough time talking about the direction of education in this country. We talk about excellent schools, but we don't say what we mean by those excellent schools. And the reality is that however good our schools are in East Penn today, if we don't innovate and change, move from schools that were created in the model, created in the Industrial Revolution, and transform them for an economy that's based on the Information Revolution, our schools won't be good for very much longer. And our property values won't be as high as they are today. And then we'll be in this sort of downward spiral like the unfortunate folks in the Allentown School District are. Right? Why do we have schools in which we sort people by age, for example, right? The reason is because that's just what you do with products in a factory, right? You date stamp them. Why do we insist on continuing to teach people in these discrete subjects when these discrete subjects are almost never dealt with discretely when you enter the real world? There's all kinds of changes that have happened in education over the last 10 to 20 years that we need to incorporate into our thinking about the schools. And I think it's the role of the school board to be focused on education. Education is something that they can do something about, and they can set the direction for this community.
All right, there's a question from the floor.
But you know, I'm grabbing water.
Senator Rubio, I didn't realize we were this. There you go. There you go.
That's your customer.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay. Question from the floor is, do you find it acceptable that the East Penn School District collects dues on behalf of the teachers union?
That collects dues on behalf of the teachers union.
The union dues, the collection is part of the contract.
Part of the payroll deduction.
I believe that's part of state law and how collective bargaining is addressed in Pennsylvania. I don't have any. Fair enough. I don't have any problem with it.
I have a question.
Another question from the floor?
This is on a personal matter. What do you do at Lehigh University, and what is your profession?
What is my name?
What do you do? You have a PhD, but what do you teach, or do you?
I'm on the faculty. I'm a professor at Lehigh. I do teach, but I think one of the things that people often don't understand about university professors is that teaching is only one of the things that I do. Much of what I do is actually conduct research in my field. I'm a sociologist. I work primarily on issues of religion and violence, and only 40% of my job description is teaching.
Okay, and the reason I ask that is because, no offense to your profession, what you do, but I'm around a lot of professors and teachers in my family life. And I am curious as to, you're running on the Republican ticket and you work at Lehigh University. I'm sorry, but I guess I have a completely different picture as to...
May I address one point?
Yes.
This is not a partisan forum.
Oh, it isn't?
The East Penn School District elections are cross-filing, whether we are the sponsors thereof. However, and the East Penn Republicans may or may not choose to endorse any candidate, but this is an informational forum, so it's not.
So I'm just curious as to what his views like. Do they lie more independent? Because the other girl brought it up. I don't know.
No, please ask your question, but I just want to make clear that this.
So I'd like to know where your views will fall down the road.
Well, I mean, I don't know what that means to my views about what. I mean, I can tell you I'm a registered Republican. I've been a registered Republican for 2 years. Before that, I was an independent for 8 years in Pennsylvania. Prior to that, I have lived in states where registration was not, with any political party, wasn't as important as it is in Pennsylvania.
Not necessarily, but where they kind of tend to go, which way, like in terms of...
Yeah, but
Up, down.
any question should be specific to Professor Munson, not academia as a whole.
Lehigh University is a very big place.
Who did you support in the last presidential election?
I supported Barack Obama.
Thank you.
Questions? Any other questions? This question, I'm sorry, go ahead, please.
Yeah, same question I asked the prior. I probably would have asked everyone, but not anything. And I guess just to dial in more, I'm not necessarily even saying it's to stop negative things. Like, for example, despite the funding mechanism of the Costco and the Target, that's potentially seen as down the line as being a good thing for the school district. So it's not necessarily just negative, although population problems in the township, that could be perceived as negative. But it's a two-way street. The question is, do you think that the school district should have a seat at the table in these regional discussions? Again, non-binding in advisory role.
Absolutely. I mean, I can go on about that. One of the things that I answered in my question that, that the system is broken in our area because we don't have any credible or meaningful regional planning. And what that means is that local existing residents are left holding back. if we have regional planning, some of those problems could be addressed. You know, having a seat at the table is only the first step.
This question was asked from the floor earlier. Would you consider a committee structure for the school board? And if so, how might you structure a committee? You know, what committees might you say, or some committees might you suggest?
It's a good question. I would definitely support committee structure. I haven't thought through it enough to know, to sort of specify exactly what those would be. I mean, for one thing, I think committee structure is a better way to get the public more involved in the decision-making process. Because right now, you have a system in which the public is getting very limited access at the very beginning of meetings, and they make comments that may or may not be related to the agenda items that need to be discussed at the time. If you have a committee structure, you can have the public attend committee meetings and speak to the issues that are actually being addressed directly. And so it greatly increases the likelihood that you can have real interaction between the public and those who are on the school board. So I definitely support it in principle, but you know, I don't have a concrete plan for what the committees would be.
Please.
In your other places you've lived or been, have you ever served on any other government or school board capacity?
No, I have never run for any elected position unless maybe I like ran for my third grade water runner or something. Yeah. I mean, to me, the school board is about taking a thankless job and collecting all the information you need about a lot of very complex issues and making smart decisions in conjunction with everyone else on the board in a balanced, fair way that deals with all the stakeholders in a community. Not in the service of a particular ideology, but something that's going to help everyone. And one of the reasons that I decided to run for a school board was that I think that I have something to contribute in that area. I have a lot of professional experience working with people with extraordinary amounts of data, trying to solve complex problems that are both sort of quantitative in nature, but also have sort of rich texture and qualitative issues as well. And that's what I would hope to bring to this school board.
The answers to one of your questions was, quite frankly, puzzled me. So I'm going to ask you if you could expand upon your answer to, since you would be involved in the next school board contract negotiations, what would you like to happen? And two sentences were, professionalism requires a contract that provides flexibility to innovate and meet the demands of a changed economy. Professionalism is reflected in a contract that allows for employees to benefit during good economic times. It calls for shared sacrifice. I'm not sure what you mean by that. Could you tell me?
Sure. So this goes back to sort of what I had said at the very beginning about how I feel like the school board needs to focus more on educational issues. Right now, one of the problems that we have with the teacher's contract is it treats teachers not as professionals, but as wage laborers in a factory, right? It specifies every sort of little detail of what they're supposed to be doing, what time, so on and so forth. So when we sit down to make the list of the things that we want as a school board, I think high on my list would be increased flexibility by teachers and by the administration to innovate in the classroom in ways that would be useful for the students, as well as useful for the community at large by being able to provide education at a lower cost. The second part is simply, that there's no reason, I don't see any reason why teachers should not receive wage increases when the economy and their performance sort of warrants it, and at the same time, during bad economic times, they provide some level of shared sacrifice. And I think that the teachers in this district have already shown their willingness to do that in the way in which this economic crisis has been handled over the last few years.
Any other questions? It's your opportunity.
I don't know what the new laws are and everything with, I guess, the state curriculum where you have to follow certain procedures. Is that what, are you referring to, they should revert back to the way it used to be, with teachers having more flexibility in the classroom? Because now I know a lot of teachers have to follow a lot of guidelines and rules and have to fill out forms every week and return in reports. Is that what you're referring to? When they should have a little more flexibility in the classroom, they shouldn't be under scrutiny as much?
Well, the issue isn't so much scrutiny, it's whether or not it makes sense to run an education system using a factory model, right, in which you have, you know, managers that decide what the middle management is going to do, that then enforces a series of decisions on the people on the factory floor that have to put the widgets in, right? In fact, teaching is like medicine. Teaching is like law. Teaching is like architecture, right? It is a creative process that requires an incredible amount of talent and a great deal of experience and education itself. And I believe we need a contract that can best allow teachers to use that expertise, right? So teachers are treated like true professionals. Right? My answer to the question was, I think we need a contract that reflects that fully. And I think right now, right, we would have to move towards that because there's many aspects of the teacher's contract today that does not treat them like professionals.
Anything further from the floor? Well, Professor Ruffley, if you'd like to make a few concluding comments, and then we'll open it up. There'll be mixed time for everybody to ask any follow-up questions.
I don't really say, because I'm new to this process, I've done a lot of knocking on doors in the various neighborhoods throughout the East Penn community. And one of the things that's been really rewarding to me about that process is seeing the real diversity of concerns that citizens have about the school district. I have not found, on the whole, that there is a single thing that people care about. I go to doors where people are really concerned about bullying. I go to doors where people are really concerned about school safety. I go to doors where people are really concerned about taxes. I go to doors where people are really concerned about the arts and music and so forth. And I think that the best way, given that diversity of concerns that everyone in our community who's contributing to this district has, the best way to sort of meet those concerns is to have a school board that is able to balance the needs of everyone and doesn't come in with some specific ideology of what they want to do, some sort of set-in-stone agenda of what the world should look like. But people who are open and inclusive to hearing other people's opinions and figuring out what the best way forward is for everyone in this community, rather than just the sort of anointed few. So I thank you for your time and for staying till the sort of bitter end.
As we conclude, I'd like to thank all of our presenters this evening. Mr. Donatelli, if you don't mind standing up just so everybody can remember who you are. And Mr. Alan Earnshaw, if you would stand. Mr. Rhodes, Ms. Hyatt, and obviously we just saw Professor Montague. Thank you. Appreciate your time.